Sony has announced the official launch date and price details of their eagerly anticipated PlayStation VR2, the next-gen version of PlayStation's virtual reality headset. Specific details have been released for the PlayStation VR2, alongside which bundles and accessories will be available on launch day. PlayStation's first iteration of its modern virtual reality headset, the PlayStation VR, was released in 2016, exclusively for PlayStation 4, and enjoyed a successful launch. The PlayStation VR went on to sell over 5 million copies, eventually receiving compatibility for PlayStation 5, although no PlayStation 5 games currently support the VR headset. At the 2022 Consumer Electronics Show, Sony announced the development of the PlayStation VR2, which will be specifically designed for the PlayStation 5. Isabel Thomadis, PlayStation's Vice President of Brand, Hardware, and Peripherals, announced that the new PlayStation VR2 and the PlayStation VR2 Sense controller charging station, designed specifically for the PSVR2 Sense controller, will be officially launched on February 22, 2023. PlayStation VR2 has been revealed to cost $550 and will include the PlayStation VR2 headset, PSVR2 Sense controllers and stereo headphones. Although the Sense controllers can be charged through the PS5's USB ports, the dedicated charging station will cost an additional $50. From November 15, 2022, pre-orders will be exclusively available from the PlayStation Online Store for customers in the US, UK, France, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, with players in other regions able to pre-order from participating local retailers on the same date. A bundled version which includes a download voucher for Horizon Call of the Mountain will also launch for $600. Sony has already showcased the upcoming VR releases of Resident Evil Village, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, and Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge. However, have also announced 11 new VR2 compatible titles that will come to PS5 in 2023. Besides Horizon Call of the Mountain and Resident Evil Village, VR fans have 11 more games to look forward to when PlayStation VR2 launches next year. You can find the list on the PlayStation blog. Developers Ndreams have officially unveiled Ghostbusters: Rise of the Ghost Lord and announced that the virtual reality game will release in 2023. Sony Pictures Virtual Reality will be producing the game, with Dan Aykroyd's Ghost Core team overseeing the latest entry in the Ghostbusters universe. Previously announced as Ghostbusters VR at the MetaQuest Game Showcase in April. Players will be able to take on the mantle of a new recruit in San Francisco who is learning the ropes to becoming the latest paranormal investigator when the game releases for both MetaQuest 2 and PlayStation VR 2 next year. The latest entry in the Ghostbusters universe comes hot off the heels of Ghostbusters Afterlife, the 2021 continuation of the long-running franchise. Rise of the Ghost Lord will see a new cast of characters pick up their proton packs as they start life in the Californian metropolis. The titular Ghost Lord and his malevolent horde will be haunting iconic locations such as the Golden Gate Bridge, and it is up to the player to bust the impending threat. The adventure can be played either solo or as a co-op adventure, but it is currently unknown if the VR title will support crossplay. Rise of the Ghost Lord's location might be different from the New York location that fans of the series will be used to. But Ndreams have stacked the game full of iconic Ghostbusters equipment such as the legendary proton packs and PKE meters that can be upgraded throughout the story. Players can also expect a number of customizable options when creating their character so that die-hard fans have the opportunity to recreate themselves in-game. The next virtual reality entry in the nearly 40-year-old franchise follows the well-received Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, the asymmetrical multiplayer that was released earlier in the year. Spirits Unleashed acts more as a love letter to the series, focusing on the cat-and-mouse gameplay as a team of 4 players tries to hunt out and capture a single ghost. Sony is leading the way in console virtual reality technology with the launch of the PlayStation VR 2 as its next-gen VR product. With the success of the PlayStation 5 being the fastest-selling PlayStation console of all time and the high sales and popularity of the original PlayStation VR unit, the new iteration is set to be a big hit for Sony. Assuming that the VR2 doesn't experience supply shortages similar to the PlayStation 5, this new release will usher in a new era of virtual reality experiences for gamers to enjoy. If you want to know about the capabilities and the specs of the PlayStation VR 2, check out this video. Speaking of PlayStation gaming hardware, Sony confirms a ton of new details regarding its upcoming DualSense Edge controller, including a January release date, additional features, and the price. The unique PlayStation 5 controller was initially revealed at Gamescom opening night live, surprising fans who weren't expecting much from Sony at the annual event. Similar to Microsoft's own Elite controller, the DualSense Edge wireless controller announcement showcased a highly customizable piece of hardware. Unfortunately, many of the details fans were hoping to see, including price and release date, were left out of the DualSense Edge announcement. However, Sony has finally provided a big update on the controller, answering many of the remaining community questions in the process. The biggest piece of information for many players is that the DualSense Edge wireless controller for PS5 will launch globally starting on January 26, 2023. Thanks to a new blog post and trailer, fans got even more details regarding the upcoming piece of hardware, including a rundown of all the major features. Naturally, the biggest feature of the DualSense Edge is what Sony's calling ultra-customizable controls, including changeable stick caps, replaceable stick modules, and back buttons. However, the player has even more control over their experience with customizable button mapping, adjustable trigger stops and dead zones through a slider on the back, as well as the ability to tune the controller's stick sensitivity and dead zones. Better yet, players can save multiple control profiles, so the adjustments aren't lost between games or users. The last remaining piece of the puzzle is price, which Sony confirmed to be $200. Slightly higher than Microsoft's Xbox Elite wireless controller for the Series X and S. Sony is also making the replaceable stick modules available for separate purchase as needed, with a recommended retail price of $20. Pre-orders open on Tuesday, October 25, 2022 in the US, UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg through the PlayStation Direct website. While the release date is going to miss out on God of War Ragnarok, the early 2023 date does put it in prime position for the big plans Sony seemingly has for the upcoming year. Already, Sony first-party studio Insomniac Games reconfirmed that the highly anticipated Marvel Spider-Man 2 is still on track for release in 2023. Pairing it up with some major third-party releases like Final Fantasy XVI, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, and plenty more to be announced. CD Projekt Red has announced several projects in recent weeks, with its most recent reveal being that The Witcher Remake is in development on Unreal Engine 5. As many know, CD Projekt Red's biggest and most prolific franchise is The Witcher. The second and third games of the trilogy have always received the most attention, but knowing the first game is being brought up to current levels is exciting for the franchise as a whole. Of course, The Witcher Remake isn't the only project within the franchise, as CD Projekt Red is working on PS5 and Xbox Series X upgrades for The Witcher 3. It is also working on the first major Cyberpunk 2077 DLC, Phantom Liberty, and beginning work on a proper sequel. There's also Project Hadar, which is a brand new, original IP for the studio. That's a lot for any one studio, but it should be noted most of this is in early development, save Cyberpunk's DLC and The Witcher 3's upgrades. The Witcher Remake was previously discussed under the codename Canis Majoris, and according to CD Projekt Red, it's still early for the game. The studio wants to make sure it is recreated with the utmost care and attention to detail. Therefore, CD Projekt Red is asking for patience alongside this exciting news. It is still in early development with Unreal Engine 5, with the project outsourced to the Polish development studio Fool's Theory, which includes veterans of the Witcher series on staff. CD Projekt Red is maintaining full creative supervision over the project. The Witcher put CD Projekt Red on the map, and it was a big moment for the studio. According to studio head Adam Badowski, going back to this place and remaking the game for the next generation of gamers to experience it feels just as big, if not bigger. Collaborating with Fool's Theory on the project is just as exciting, as some of the people there have been previously involved in the Witcher games. They know the source material well, they know how much gamers have been looking forward to seeing the remake happen, and they know how to make incredible and ambitious games. The original game was made using a limited budget using a borrowed and modified version of BioWare's Aurora engine, leading to several limiting issues. The game was received fairly well at the time of its release, though several aspects of The Witcher did not get better with time, especially in light of its better-received sequels. While the game has merits that make it worth revisiting, The Witcher Remake has a lot of room to make improvements for a definitive release. It goes without saying that The Witcher Remake is going to be leaps and bounds better in terms of graphical quality compared to the original game. Some exceptional-looking games are being made with Unreal Engine 5, and this will make the many environments in The Witcher Remake look better than they have before, likely far beyond the graphical quality presented in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. From murky swamps, the bustling streets of Vizima, and serene lakeside fields, the locations of The Witcher can only benefit from a graphical upgrade if they keep the same atmosphere. Something from the original Witcher game that won't translate as well if they are kept one-to-one is the character models. One of the most infamous parts of The Witcher is how most of the characters look strange up close. They drift into uncanny valley territory and look almost alien, particularly characters like Geralt and Zoltan. Changes in character designs can be seen as the games progressed, making Geralt of The Witcher 3 look completely different from the original game. The Witcher Remake should use similar models to the ones in The Witcher 3 with extra upgrades. The Witcher had the difficult task of trying to follow up on the Witcher book series. Those books left off on a note that seemed like a fairly decisive end for Geralt's journey, so the games were in a tough spot having to continue the story. This resulted in a narrative that got better as each game went on, though many of the concepts from the first game did not lead anywhere. CD Projekt Red could not have known how successful the Witcher series would be, so it resulted in much of the first game being pretty fragmented. One character that is a focal point of the Witcher's story is Alvin. A child with magical powers that is a clear stand-in for Ciri, who book readers know is occupied with other things at the time of the game. There are some credible theories about Alvin among the fanbase that make them a more interesting character, but the game itself does not give enough time to develop him well. The Witcher Remake should add some more nuance to the character, and perhaps add some more support to these fan theories through extra quests and dialogue. In general, The Witcher Remake could add a lot more emotional nuance to the story. The voice actors and quest designers were just getting to know these characters, so they did not have as much of a grasp on their emotions as in the second or third games. For example, there is a returning character from the books, Princess Ada, whom Geralt has helped before. Lifting her curse in the books was a huge moment for both characters, and should have had more impact in the games. It also does not help that the connection between these two characters is made creepy by being rewarded a romance card upon completion. From the combat to the game world, there are plenty of ways to modernize the original Witcher. Doing so doesn't just make it more accessible to new players, but also gives older fans a new way of experiencing the game. Overall, it makes the game feel a lot more streamlined and polished. First and foremost, The Witcher Remake needs to change up the original game's combat. The first game's fighting mechanics have been described as rhythm game-esque because for the player to land hits on the enemy, they have to click at the right time. Additionally, they need to be using the right combat stance, otherwise, Geralt's attacks won't work. Admittedly, this system of combat is outdated, especially when compared to The Witcher 3 and even The Witcher 2. However, while there's a need to modernize the system, that doesn't have to mean doing away with the old game's features completely. Perhaps The Witcher Remake can borrow the combat mechanics of The Witcher 3 but still retain there being 3 different attack styles. This makes combat less repetitive and more challenging, which is something players wanted more of in The Witcher 3. Another feature that needs tweaking in The Witcher Remake is the character progression system. In the original Witcher, leveling up abilities required a resource known as talents, and there were 3 types: bronze talents, silver talents, and gold talents. This made it considerably more difficult for players to plot out their builds as they'd have to ration their different talents. In contrast, The Witcher 3's ability point system is a lot simpler and streamlined. While it still pushes the player to plot out their use of ability points in advance, it's nowhere near as complex as the system in The Witcher. Instead of having different variations of ability points, the player can just focus on collecting the number of points they need for whatever build they choose. Because at the end of the day, more complex doesn't always mean better. Despite The Witcher 3's less complex ability point system, it still poses a challenge given the limited number of points that the player can acquire in a single playthrough. Additionally, acquiring the abilities doesn't make them take effect. Geralt still needs to equip them, meaning the player has to prioritize which abilities to use at any given time. This is one way for The Witcher Remake to prevent players from becoming too overpowered, though notably, some in the community aren't too fond of the ability slot system. In addition to the altered character progression mechanics, The Witcher Remake should also implement The Witcher 3's mutagens. In The Witcher 3's ability menu, the player has a number of extra slots specifically for mutagens. These are rare alchemical ingredients acquired from different monsters that amplify the effects of certain abilities. But to fully optimize them, the player has to match the right abilities to the right mutagen. Red mutagens bolster combat-based abilities, blue mutagens bolster sign-based abilities, and green mutagens bolster alchemy-based abilities. The original Witcher game didn't have a system like this, but it'd be a welcome addition. The mutagens provide an extra layer to character progression, which further encourages players to choose a build and commit to it. It also provides incentives for players to go out and search for mutagens, thus making monster contracts and exploration more worthwhile. This feature is a bit difficult to navigate as some players like the open world of The Witcher 3, while others much prefer the smaller, more controlled environments of The Witcher 1 and 2. That said, there's a case to be made for the implementation of an open world in The Witcher Remake. It doesn't have to be as expansive as the game world of The Witcher 3. If anything, the developer could simply make past levels accessible even after their relevant chapters and quests have already been completed. For example, upon reaching the latter chapters of the original Witcher, Geralt would gain access to the walled city of Vizima. However, this would also bar the player from returning to the outskirts of Vizima, where the preceding chapter took place. Perhaps The Witcher Remake can alter this, and allow Geralt to revisit past locations. Much like how The Witcher 3's open world lets the player travel back to Novigrad even after unlocking the Skellige Isles. It could even allow for new quests to showcase the consequences of the player's actions in past chapters. A perfect blueprint for this would be the Norse world from God of War. Lastly, the original Witcher already had main quests, side quests, and even monster contracts, but it had no treasure hunt type quests. Admittedly, many of the treasure hunts in The Witcher 3 were more tedious than fun. However, the more enjoyable treasure hunt quests were no doubt the ones involving Witcher gear. That said, The Witcher Remake can implement something similar to The Witcher 3's treasure hunts for unique Witcher armor. These not only provide the player with powerful gear but are also a great avenue for world building, giving players a fresh perspective of Vizima and its surrounding locations. However, the developer needs to be cautious in implementing these quests. The number of treasure hunts in The Witcher Remake should not be as excessive as that of The Witcher 3. Otherwise, it runs the risk of becoming repetitive. Overall, there are plenty of features in The Witcher 3 for The Witcher Remake to draw on. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one-to-one copy of old elements. The developer can simply take inspiration from the things that have already worked before and try to improve them for the unique context of The Witcher. The right mix of old and new will no doubt result in a more modern and inspired recreation of the game that started it all. The original Witcher game tells the story of Geralt attempting to recover his lost memories while also dealing with political unrest, figures from his past, and, of course, the monster hunting contracts with which a Witcher earns his keep. The remake, which will be made as a collaboration between developers CD Projekt Red and Fool's Theory, will redo the 2007 game in the modern Unreal Engine 5. Content will likely be added, as later Witcher games became known for the sheer amount of things to do and places to explore, and the first game now feels rather slight in comparison. Gwent, a game featuring cards inspired by Geralt, his allies, and his enemies, would be the perfect addition, creating much more for players to do outside of the remake's main story. Although Gwent began its life as a simple minigame in The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, the card game's popularity soon went above and beyond the game itself. Many fans reported that they had spent hours playing Gwent, even putting aside the game's main quest in favor of hunting down cards and winning in-game tournaments. CD Projekt Red responded to the game's popularity by releasing tie-in merch such as physical Gwent cards and an Art of Gwent book. Eventually Gwent the Witcher card game was released as a separate title, featuring an expanded roster of cards and updated, more complicated rules. Another spin-off game, Thronebreaker The Witcher Tales, utilizes Gwent mechanics in a single-player campaign. Today, Gwent remains extremely popular, with tournaments being held regularly and new cards sometimes added to the game. Gwent in The Witcher Remake could be a great way for Geralt to recover his memories. As the cards feature important mythological and political figures as well as many of Geralt's friends and associates. It could also add more depth for in-game NPCs such as Dandelion the Bard, as Geralt could play Gwent against a number of different characters as a way to have additional conversations with them. Gwent could also replace the poorly aged sex card mechanic from the original Witcher, in which the player received picture cards for sleeping with various women. This mechanic was unpopular because it reduced many of the women in the game to simple objects, nothing more than a name and a picture on a card. Gwent is a much more interesting and less problematic way of utilizing cards in Geralt's adventures. The popular collectible card game is not the only addition from later Witcher games that fans hope to see in the remake of the original title. Fans also hope to see graphical updates, improvements to the combat system, mutagens, ability points, and more depth to characters such as the cursed Princess Ada or Alvin, a magical child who serves as a substitute for Ciri. While it is unlikely that the remake will make major changes to the story, meaning that it will probably not feature fan-favorite characters such as Yennefer or the aforementioned Ciri, it is definitely possible that CD Projekt Red could implement changes to make The Witcher remake a more fun and satisfying experience for all players. The Witcher is a great game that often gets overshadowed by others in its series due to outdated systems. It is a game that's still worth playing for fans of the Witcher series, and hopefully The Witcher remake is a good opportunity to introduce new players to the game's unique identity. PlayStation London Studio announced that it's working on a new online co-op game. Developers haven't revealed a title, gameplay or release window, though concept art indicates that it will be a fantasy action game set in contemporary London. Sony established PlayStation London Studio as a UK-based first-party developer by merging the Getaway developer Team Soho with Psygnosis's Camden Studio. It is best known for titles like 2004's The Getaway Black Monday, the SingStar series of competitive music video games, and iToy motion control games. More recently, the studio also developed games for PlayStation VR, with its most recent release being the VR FPS Blood and Truth. However, London Studio is reportedly stepping away from PlayStation VR for its next title. The studio's co-heads Tara Saunders and Stuart White announced the untitled fantasy action game during a recent interview with GamesIndustry.biz. "It is our most ambitious game to date," said Saunders, who emphasized how the studio is bringing its DNA of innovation to bear on the upcoming co-op game. London Studio isn't ready to announce a title or release window yet, and the British studio did not say much about the new title's gameplay apart from its online co-op focus. However, White confirmed the developer is making the game in its proprietary Soho engine, which he says was purpose-built to take advantage of the PS5's more powerful hardware compared to the PS4. Additionally, while it will not be VR, White explained that the London studio's experience with VR games helped the studio design its engine to be more efficient. While the upcoming game doesn't have a title yet, the Blood and Truth developer shared a piece of concept art showing fantasy characters battling goblins and dragons on the streets of London. Saunders explained how the developers wanted to blend fantastical elements with a more familiar setting. She explained that, as the studio's namesake and home city, London was the natural choice for the upcoming game's location. White also explained how it's a concept that a lot of people are interested in, with the company having settled on it after anonymously polling hundreds of gamers in the US and UK. London Studio's newly announced co-op title is part of Sony's push to expand into the extremely lucrative but still sometimes controversial games-as-a-service model. Sony plans to launch 12 new live service games for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 by March 2026. This plan includes the upcoming Twisted Metal reboot, The Last of Us long-awaited multiplayer spin-off, and a new IP from Destiny developer Bungie. Marvel and Electronic Arts are officially announcing a multi-title collaboration for EA to develop 3 games based on established Marvel characters, including Iron Man. Marvel has been increasing its efforts to license its comic book superheroes, villains, and properties out for video game development. Marvel Snap, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and the upcoming Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine from Insomniac are just a few examples. The partnership between Marvel and EA does not come as a significant surprise. In late September, EA and Marvel announced the development of a single-player Iron Man game at Motive Studios, the team behind the upcoming Dead Space remake. The Iron Man project was confirmed to be early in development, so is unlikely to be released for years yet. Check out my coverage and predictions for the Iron Man game, which I have discussed in my previous video. EA also confirmed that more Marvel games would be developed in the future. In the latest update regarding Marvel and EA's collaboration, the official total for upcoming games has been increased from just Iron Man to 3 games in total. The 2 additional games have not had their titles confirmed, as yet. The only other details shared include confirmation that each game will focus on its own story set in the Marvel universe and that they're being developed for consoles and PC. Reports suggest that the Iron Man game is in playtesting stage already. The report states that these sessions are more feedback sessions than playtesting. This will presumably consist of going over plot points, game mechanics, game modes, and more. Get an inside look at a game/product and talk through your experience directly with an EA researcher. EA's playtesting website reads. They will ask you questions about your experiences, preferences, and other areas of interest. These conversations typically last between 30 and 120 minutes. And may happen online or in person at one of our player experience labs. While Marvel and EA weren't willing to share any further information about the 3 projects, there has been some secondary reporting on the subject. Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb shared on Twitter that he's confirmed that the first 2 games will be Iron Man and an unannounced Black Panther project. Black Panther is said to be an open-world project being made by a newly started EA studio in Seattle. The Black Panther game's codename is Project Rainier, and it's being headed by ex-Monolith VP Kevin Stevens. As for the 3rd game, Grubb says that EA and Marvel actually haven't decided what the game will be yet. EA and Marvel have simply agreed that another game should be made, but the property it focuses on and the team that will develop it are still a mystery. Grubb also believes that this 3rd project is so far off that it could change 100 times. It may be exciting to hear that Marvel and EA will be making multiple projects, but in terms of actual game news, fans may be waiting quite a while for an update. Luckily, as noted, there are a lot of Marvel games currently in development, including Marvel Spider-Man 2 and Marvel World of Heroes, outside of EA that should be arriving in the next year or 2. Expect plenty of Marvel game news from EA and elsewhere before long. Fans of the horror game genre in Japan may be disappointed to learn that the Callisto protocol won't be releasing there at all. But it's good to see that the developers aren't compromising the game to meet certain standards. Fans are eagerly awaiting the release of the horror game, which is currently slated to launch on December 2nd. The Callisto protocol may help to fill the void that Dead Space's absence has left behind. And whet the appetite of those who are on the fence about checking out the Dead Space remake that's slated for early 2023. It's the body horror and gore that's keeping the Callisto protocol from being released in Japan. Although Japan is the home of some of the most iconic horror games, like Resident Evil, Japan has very strict rules regarding what can be released in the country. Its Zero rating system is the equivalent of the ESRB in the United States, but the game has failed to receive a rating from Zero due to an overabundance of violence and graphic content. In many cases, game developers will choose to release a modified version of the game, either specifically for Japan or for all regions, in order to satisfy ratings boards like Zero. However, in this case, the developers of the Callisto protocol are refusing to modify the game in order to secure its release there. It's unfortunate for Japanese fans, but also understandable on the developer's part. While the game has yet to come out, reducing or censoring the violence and gore in the game would likely have a major impact on the overall feel and gameplay of the title. The developers have surely spent a long time crafting the game to be as terrifying as possible, and making any changes now would probably undermine that. Censorship of particularly violent games isn't uncommon in Japan, even if the game originated there. Resident Evil 4, for example, contained more violence in the West than in Japan, as certain things had to be removed in Capcom's home country, like decapitations. It seemingly had a lasting impact on the franchise, as Resident Evil 5 would go on to also include decapitations, but the camera would cut away to obfuscate the violence in all versions. Whereas Western players of its predecessor were shown the entirety of the violent action. Japan also isn't the only country to require changes or censorship to titles, as Germany has also had tight restrictions on games in the past. Sadly, Japanese fans will have to buy the other language versions or mod the game, but thankfully, there's plenty of additional terrifying games scheduled for the near future. Square Enix reveals in a recent annual report that achieving success in Japan is no longer enough, and it will be shifting its focus to releasing titles that can perform well the world over. As the Western gaming market continues to expand, Square Enix has recognized that it's now necessary to cater to the entire world with its games, rather than primarily Japan. As a Japanese company, Square Enix has primarily focused on its home demographic, with other markets being secondary. However, times have changed, and as the demographics of Japan change with it, Square Enix is seeing the need to consider how to succeed everywhere. In a financial report released by Square Enix, the company discussed its plans moving forward and how it intends to achieve them. In it, the report details how Japan has a graying demographic, referring to its aging populace, and that due in combination to that and high production costs. It's necessary to produce games that will be popular all over the world, not just in Japan. Games take a lot of money to produce these days, and Square Enix notes that it's no longer possible to feasibly recoup production costs, let alone turn a profit, if its games are only selling well in Japan. The report also heavily emphasizes games that have sold well for the company across the globe, detailing 36 million units sold in the Kingdom Hearts series, 173 million for Final Fantasy. Notably 85 million for Dragon Quest, which has been a huge hit in Japan since its inception, but hasn't performed as well as series like Final Fantasy outside of the country. Now more than ever, access to new video games has become a global, simultaneous phenomenon. Companies that used to take months, if not years, to release a title outside of Japan are now releasing them simultaneously, like Sega's Like a Dragon series. This notably takes additional effort, as the developers not only have to think about the global market when designing the game, but translation and dubbing efforts have to be completed at the same time. More work than ever is going into games to get them ready for their release, and it's unlikely the demand will subside. As gamers can access games the moment they release via download and streaming instead of having to wait for a physical copy. How this will have an impact on the direction of Square Enix's future projects remains to be seen. A large number of Square Enix's biggest games have already seen major success outside of its home shores. So this focus may not have as much of a visible change on the way the developer operates as it would for other companies. In any case, Western fans can expect more Square Enix games to be coming their way, with Final Fantasy XVI and Forspoken coming early next year. Xbox Game Pass, Xbox consoles, and Xbox video games could all get price increases at some point down the line, according to head of Xbox Phil Spencer. Phil Spencer spoke at Wall Street Journal Live and suggested that Xbox will not be able to maintain the prices it currently has, forever. Phil Spencer said, "We've held price on our console. We've held price on games, and we've held price on our subscription. I don't think we'll be able to do that forever. I do think at some point we'll have to raise the prices on certain things." Spencer stated that it was important for Xbox to maintain the prices it currently has this holiday season so that its products appeal to uncertain consumers. Because Xbox has no games. Previously, Sony raised the price of its PS5 console in certain areas of the world, which prompted Xbox and Nintendo to both assure consumers that there were no plans to increase the prices of their consoles. However, Spencer's comments seem to suggest that is an option that's at least on the table. Whether it will actually happen or not remains to be seen, but Xbox gamers can count on the prices for Game Pass, consoles, and games to remain the same for at least the rest of 2022. There are a few ways that Xbox could increase the prices of its products, with one of the clearest options being a change to the cost of its consoles. This wouldn't be unheard of, considering the economic state of the world right now and the aforementioned fact that Sony also rose the price of the PS5 earlier this year. If Xbox does follow PlayStation's suit, it is possible that the Xbox Series X and S could see a rise of around 10%. Meaning a potential $60 increase on the former machine and a $30 growth on the latter. Despite an initial outpour of gamers dissatisfied with Sony's decision, it appears that the PlayStation 5 is in such high demand that the decision to raise its price won't alter its sales figures by much. The same can't be said for Xbox, as they don't have any compelling software right now. Beyond consoles, there are other ways in which Xbox could increase the prices of its products. A lot of people online are speculating that possibly the most logical step for Microsoft might be to increase the prices of its games, which mostly remain at $60. However, $70 video games are somewhat of a norm nowadays, so it would make sense for Xbox to follow an industry trend and hop on the bandwagon. There's also the matter of Xbox Game Pass, but this would also prove to be an incredibly controversial decision, especially after users have gotten used to the price they've been paying for years. Maybe after this Activision Blizzard dead goes through, they could throw those titles into the service and raise the price. It's likely Xbox will find some controversy among its users no matter what it increases the price of. Nvidia's ridiculously powerful flagship GPU, the RTX 4090, appears to be melting 16-pin power connectors as the card fails when graphic settings are maxed out in visually intensive titles. A social media post has documented a case where a RTX 4090's power supply melted, opening both Nvidia and third-party graphics card manufacturer Gigabyte up to ridicule online. This isn't the first time a powerful new Nvidia GPU has caused a stir among PC gamers. Last year, after the launch of the 3080 series of cards, gamers began to report a black screen and wailing GPU fans. While at first the Amazon game's title New World was perceived the culprit behind the failing GPUs, it was later discovered that the build quality of Gigabyte brand 3080 cards was to blame, causing further confusion in the community when Nvidia unlaunched its controversial 4080 12GB GPU. Gamers have expressed concern over the power requirements and sheer demanding design of the RTX 4090 series cards, and it appears like those concerns are warranted. During Nvidia's own green room testing, the GPU manufacturer has reportedly found that its most powerful Lovelace GPU actually melts itself, and in the process destroys PC power supplies. Concerns about the GPU's performance have potentially led Nvidia to not release it on the market. The report comes as prices on Nvidia's previous generation of RTX 3090 GPUs have begun to fall, with Amazon offering early access sales on various models. Despite the realistic prices, many PC gamers were eager to try the new generation of RTX GPUs, which boasts a nearly 50% performance increase over the previous generation. A source close to YouTuber Moore's Law is Dead, a popular technology, gaming, and lifestyle writer and podcast personality, reported that the Nvidia RTX 4090 Ti is simply too powerful for now. Also, the source reported that the RTX 4090 Ti won't be headed to market anytime soon. Supposedly, the powerful GPU was tripping breakers, melting power supplies, and sometimes the actual GPU was melting as well. Despite these concerning hardware failures, Nvidia's Team Green still has time to work out the problem and determine a way to create a working RTX 4090 Ti. Nvidia has found itself with increased competition over the years, as Intel has been working to create a comparable GPU at lower prices. PC gamers are usually looking for the most power for their dollar, and the GPU space is ultra-competitive. RTX features have become popular among PC gamers, especially since RTX enhancements improve gameplay and graphics. Multiple titles have been updated to include Nvidia's DLSS software, which boosts game performance using artificial intelligence, allowing gamers to play titles on high graphical settings without sacrificing frame rates. PC gamers are known to have a penchant for pushing the boundaries of game performance, and the RTX 4090 Ti would have been a popular option among those hungry for high-end 4K gameplay and live streaming. Various partner brand 3080 cards made news in 2021 and 2022 when the GPUs seemed to fail, leaving gamers with a black screen and wailing GPU fans. Many gamers blamed Amazon Games' MMORPG New World for the GPU failures, while others blamed the poor build quality of the partner brand GPUs themselves. It's certain that Nvidia wanted to redefine GPU power with the RTX 4090 Ti, but if these reports are true, gamers might have to wait before we see that technology functioning in a safe, usable fashion, both for the 4090 and the Ti. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then, from SMPV, it's goodbye.